Nate Dogg was like the last one in the crowd, so Nate Dogg, he was the only dude who had a problem with us.
Yeah, I heard Nate Dogg was like the most gangster one out.
Yeah, pretty much.
There was an altercation that happened on a golf course.
Yeah.
You actually got hit, right? With a golf club?
Yeah.
But by who?
Nate Dogg.
Nate Dogg.
I blocked it, but it was so much force that I didn't anticipate. So even the block, it broke my hand. And when the tip of it hit me, I bust my head, but then the tip of it broke off of it.
Everybody was gangster out of the crew. Me and Nate was just the robbers of the crew.
Most people know Nate Dogg as the smooth, soulful voice and the undisputed king of hooks, the guy who made classics with some of the biggest names in the game. But make no mistake, behind that laid-back soul was a wilder side.
You know what I'm saying? We put it down in the crew, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, when it come to whooping, see the Nate Dogg of dads.
So when even some of the wildest dudes connected to N.W.A. tried to test him, it didn't exactly end well for them. Let's break it down. So here's how the whole thing really went down. The roots of this situation stretch all the way back to the Ruthless Records versus Death Row Records feud. It all started when Dr. Dre left N.W.A. and Ruthless to co-found Death Row Records with Suge Knight. And since Nate Dogg was riding with Death Row as part of the larger Dog Pound Gangsta clique, his loyalty was obvious. He was firmly on the Death Row side of things.
The speech down right now. We need that spot.
And we don't take our hats off in the game.
Nope, we don't bow down. We don't need
Oh, look at the ball.
Now, like most rap beefs of the time, it all kicked off with diss records. Dre struck first with F Wit Dre Day and Everybody's Celebratin' from his 1992 album, The Chronic. That track was basically open season on Eazy-E, Tim Dog, and even Uncle Luke. Dre called Eazy a punk dude and accused him of cheating artists out of money. But of course, Eazy-E didn't take that lightly. In 1993, he clapped back with one of the most iconic diss records ever, Real Mother G's, featuring BG Knockout and Dresta. That track was straight venom. Eazy-E went right at Dre's credibility, calling him a studio gangster and exposing his past in the world-class Wreckin' Crew, where Dre wore shiny suits and makeup. He rapped, "All of a sudden Dr. Dre is the G-Thang, but on his old album cover, he was a she-thang." To make matters worse for Dre, Eazy reminded everybody that he was still getting paid off Dre's music thanks to old contracts, basically turning Dre Day into Eazy's payday. Meanwhile, BG Knockout and Dresta doubled down, clowning Dre and painting him as soft, which only added fuel to the fire. Things were already heated on wax, but eventually, the beef spilled into real life. And one of the most infamous moments came in 1995 at a golf course of all places, during the filming of Montel Jordan's Something for the Honeys music video. That day, you had a mix of both camps in the same space. Death Row's side was deep, with Snoop Dogg, Nate Dogg, and Dog Pound, Corrupt, and Daz Dillinger. On the Ruthless side, you had BG Knockout and Dresta. According to BG Knockout, things were cool at first. He even said when he spotted Snoop, they acknowledged each other and kept it peaceful since they had already squashed their issues.
We sitting on the balcony drinking, I see Snoop coming. So Snoop, he's smiling because me and Snoop already settled things. Like he was the only dude that I had the chance to talk to and settle stuff with.
But Nate Dogg? That was a different story. BG said Nate was the only one who really had a problem with us and described him as the most gangster out of the whole Death Row crew. And if you knew Nate's reputation, that tracks. Behind the smooth hooks, he was with all the smoke.
And then Nate Dogg was like the last one in the crowd. So Nate Dogg, he was the only dude who had a problem with us.
Yeah, I heard Nate Dogg was like the most gangster one out.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what happened next was straight street politics. Nate rolls up and throws up Long Beach, repping his set. BG Knockout fires right back with Nutty Block Crip, staking his own ground. For people who don't know, those are rival Crip neighborhoods, so this wasn't just friendly banter.
So he was like Long Beach, I was like Nutty Block Crip. He was like Long Beach, I was like Nutty Block Crip, and he just kept on walking. I was like, whatever, I kept drinking my...
That's when things escalated. Nate Dogg, riding on a golf cart, allegedly swerved at BG and ran over his foot. BG said Nate basically swooped on him and didn't even care that he actually hit him. So naturally, BG wasn't about to let that slide. He chased down the cart, and when Nate got off, he confronted him. According to BG, Nate just hit him with, "You better get out the way." And that's when BG swung first, saying he fired on him and dropped Nate.
So I'm going to meet my brother. Nate Dogg swooped on me. He swooped on me, but he ran over my foot. So I chased his golf cart. So he got out the golf cart and he was like, "What's up?" I'm like, "Run over my foot." He was like, "You better get out." I just fired on him. Bam. And when I fired on him, I dropped him. But I heard all of his boys coming behind me.
And just like that, it turned into chaos. What started as a face-off between two dudes quickly became a full-blown brawl with 15 to 20 people throwing down. Death Row's side ran to the parking lot to grab weapons, mainly golf clubs since they were at a course. That's when things got dangerous. In the middle of all this, Nate Dogg almost seriously took Dresta out. He grabbed a golf club and swung with everything he had.
I guess there was an altercation that happened on a golf course.
Yeah.
You actually got hit, right? With a golf club?
Yeah.
But by who?
Nate Dogg.
Nate Dogg.
He cracked Dresta across the head, and the impact was so brutal it broke Dresta's arm. Dresta himself later admitted that if he hadn't gotten his arm up to block that swing, it could have been fatal. We're talking about a split-second decision being the difference between life and death.
I blocked it, but it was so much force that I didn't anticipate to even to block it. Broke my hand, and when the tip of it hit me, I bust my head, but then the tip of it broke off of the club.
The fight didn't just end with fists and golf clubs flying. It drew the kind of attention nobody there wanted. Undercover police officers, dressed sharp in suits so they could blend in, had been on the scene the whole time. When the chaos popped off, they stepped in fast. But the damage was already done. Nate Dogg had shown everyone just how far he was willing to go. It was proof that Nate wasn't to be played with. That moment stuck with people. Even years later, BG Knockout himself admitted that after Nate passed, he would never disrespect him. In his own words, "I would never disrespect that man, Nate Dogg, like ever." He even called him the real gangster of that Death Row crew, which is wild considering Death Row was stacked with some heavy hitters. His own people also echoed the same thing. Daz Dillinger and Snoop Dogg both made it clear. Nate was the most gangster out of all of them. And Snoop, who had been around Nate since their teenage years, said that Nate was always going to handle business if it came down to it. And if you really trace it back, you can see where that toughness came from. Nate Dogg's childhood was rooted in music and discipline, but also survival. His father was a pastor, so from an early age, Nate's life revolved around the church. He was singing at services before he even hit his teens, and everyone could hear that his voice was something special. At New Hope Baptist Church in Long Beach, Nate's deep, soulful tone began to blossom. That church choir was his first real stage, the place where he started shaping the sound that later became his signature. But life when Nate moved to Long Beach as a teenager, things took a sharp turn. It was there that he ended up at Long Beach Polytechnic High School, and fate brought him face to face with Snoop Dogg. Nate was a senior at the time. One day in science class, Snoop started tapping out a beat on the table like he always did. And Nate, sitting nearby, decided to jump in. He let that smooth, natural voice of his flow over the rhythm, and suddenly the classroom felt like a mini concert. At first, Nate was just singing other people's songs, but Snoop remembered how Nate always had this funny way of flipping the lyrics. He'd turn them dirty, raunchy, and hilarious. That playful, creative chemistry sparked something. In that moment, they clicked. Neither of them knew it yet, but that classroom freestyle was the seed that would eventually grow into one of hip-hop's most legendary partnerships.
I just linked up with Nate Dogg.
1986 at Poly High School. Nate was in the 12th grade. We were sitting in the back of the class, and I would beat on the tape. And this be singing like other people's songs, but he would make them dirty.
Still, Nate's path wasn't a straight shot to music. In 1987, when he was only 17, he shocked everybody by dropping out of high school and enlisting in the U.S. Marines. For most kids his age, it was about finishing school or chasing dreams, but Nate wanted to prove something. He later said that joining the Marines was his way of stepping into manhood, of showing he was strong enough to handle discipline and responsibility. He ended up stationed at Camp Schwab in Okinawa, Japan, working as an ammunition specialist for the 3rd Force Service Support Group. For 3 years, Nate lived that military life, early mornings, strict rules, and the kind of structure that could either break a person or build them up. For Nate, it gave him a different kind of toughness, a sharpened sense of discipline that he would later carry into the music industry. But as much as the Marines shaped him, that wasn't where his heart truly was. By 1989, Nate had done his time, completed his service, and came back home to Long Beach with a whole new mindset. The military had shown him he could handle pressure and survive anything. Now, he was ready to chase the one thing that had been calling him since those early days in the choir: music. He linked right back up with Snoop Dogg and Warren G, and the three of them were basically inseparable. Music wasn't just something they did together, it was their bond, their escape, and their future. Pretty soon, they decided to make it official and form a group. There was this crew from Oakland called 415 that inspired them, so they flipped the idea and named themselves 213, after LA's original area code, which back then stretched across Long Beach and beyond.
The group in Oakland called 415 was like, we need to be 213.
But for them, 213 wasn't just about numbers on a map. It was a flag they planted for all of Southern Cali. They wanted people to know it stood for everywhere they repped: Long Beach, Compton, Orange County, San Gabriel Valley. If you were from Southern California, 213 was claiming you.
And 213 represents, it's not just a number to us, it's a movement. Because at one point in time, 213 represented all of Southern California, whether you was in Orange County, San Gabriel Valley.
Their grind in those early days was as raw as it gets. They cut their first demo in the back of a little record store in Long Beach. The setup wasn't glamorous at all, but they made it work. That tape traveled around until it landed in Dr. Dre's hands at a bachelor party. Dre threw it on, listened, and right then and there he knew these guys were different. That moment changed everything. Dre wasted no time. He brought Snoop and Nate into the Death Row fold, signing them and setting their careers in motion. Warren G didn't come with them, he went his own route and chased a solo path. But the split was never about beef. Their friendship stayed solid and they kept collaborating and showing up on each other's records. At Death Row, Snoop quickly formed Thaw Dog Pound with Corrupt and Daz Dillinger, one of the most legendary groups in West Coast rap. Nate wasn't officially in Thaw Dog Pound, but his fingerprints were all over their sound. As part of the larger Dog Pound gangsta clique, Nate's voice kept showing up everywhere. He was like the glue, giving their hard tracks that soulful melodic edge. But it was Death Row that truly launched Nate into the spotlight. His first big moment came on Dr. Dre's 1992 masterpiece, The Chronic. Nate's smooth melodic vocals slipped perfectly into Dre's G-Funk blueprint. His voice wasn't background filler, it became a signature piece of the sound. Tracks like D's Nuts and Lil Ghetto Boy showed just how effortlessly Nate could take a hard story from the streets and flip it into something soulful. By the time 1993 rolled around, he was all over Snoop's debut album Doggy Style. And of course, there's ain't no fun if the homies can't have none. The track where Nate's hook didn't just steal the show, it became the blueprint for hooks in rap moving forward. Then came 1994, and Regulate. Nate and Warren G dropped what is still one of the most iconic duets in hip-hop history. Nate's voice on that record cemented him as the king of hooks. From that point on, he wasn't just a Death Row singer, he was the guy everybody wanted on their record, and he lived up to that title. Over his career, Nate ended up on 16 Billboard Hot 100 hits as a featured artist. From 50 Cent's 21 Questions to Ludacris's Area Codes, Nate Dogg had a way of turning songs into anthems. He touched tracks with 2PAC, Eminem, Mobb Deep, Dr. Dre, Fabulous, you name it. If Nate Dogg's voice was on the hook, you knew the song was about to hit. But here's the thing. While fans saw the smooth, talented Nate who was killing every feature, there was always another side to him. The wild side. because the truth was, Nate and the law were practically hand in hand throughout his career. First off, before the fame, Nate himself admitted that back in those early days, he turned to illegal activities to cover for housing and just to get by day to day. The streets were his reality, and that reality pulled him into things that would later come back to haunt him. On top of that, Nate struggled with personal demons. Addiction was part of his story, and it led to a cycle of arrests, rehab stints, and more run-ins with the law. He was no stranger to the criminal justice system. By the time his name was starting to buzz in the music scene, he already had a record, robbery charges, related offenses, even accusations of domestic violence. And when his career started taking off, the chaos didn't stop. In fact, it grew right alongside his fame. In the early 90s, Nate found himself facing some serious robbery charges. One case from 1994 accused him of robbing a Taco Bell, and if the court had gone the other way, he could have been staring at 11 years behind bars. Luckily for him, he beat that case and was acquitted.
Nate Dogg had 5 Taco Bell robberies on camera.
He was on camera 5 times robbing Taco Bell.
But it wasn't the end. By 1996, he was convicted of a drug-related offense in LA County, which added to the list of legal headaches. Things escalated even further in 2000 with one of his wildest arrests. He was hit with serious charges and even arson over an incident involving his ex-girlfriend and her mom's car. That wasn't a regular arrest either. He was taken down by a SWAT team. Dr. Dre had to step in and bail him out with a reported $1 million. The case eventually fell apart, and those major charges were dismissed. But Nate still caught trouble for being a felon in possession of a firearm. He pled no contest, took 3 years probation, and paid a $1,000 fine. And even that wasn't the last of it. In 2002, while touring in Arizona, police searched his bus and found 2 pistols and about 4 ounces of weed. Nate pled guilty to possession, and this time the court gave him probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. Then in the mid-2000s, more trouble followed. In 2006 and 2008, he faced charges for trespassing, battery, telephone harassment, and even stalking. Some of those cases fell apart when the alleged victims stopped cooperating, but they still added to his long, complicated history. He even caught a DUI at one point. And all of this was happening while death row was its own circus of drama. Nate was right there in the middle of it, witnessing the chaos, dealing with the dysfunction, and eventually getting fed up with Suge Knight. By the late 90s, Nate had had enough. He ended up filing a $10 million lawsuit against Suge for unpaid royalties, which tells you just how badly artists were getting jerked around at the label. His debut solo album, G-Funk Classics, Volume 1 and 2, sat on the shelf for 2 years before finally coming out in 1998. That delay showed how messed up the label was. Artists couldn't get their music released, and even when it did, the money didn't always make it to their pockets. Despite all of this, Nate Dogg still managed to carve out a legacy as one of the most important voices in hip-hop. But behind the music, his health began to take a toll. In 2007, Nate suffered his first stroke. It left him partially paralyzed, and suddenly the man whose voice had carried so many records was fighting a battle for his own body. A year later, in 2008, he had a second stroke that made things even harder. Still, those close to him said Nate was a fighter. His longtime manager and friend Rod McGrew shared that Nate was working every day to recover, rebuilding his memory, sharpening his mind, and regaining independence. By 2010, he was showing signs of progress. He was alert, he was aware, and he seemed to be making a comeback in his recovery. That's why his death in 2011, at just 41 years old, hit everyone like a shockwave. McGrew said nobody expected it. One day, he was pushing forward, and then suddenly, he was gone. "We appreciate the outpouring of response from all over the world," McGrew said in a statement afterward, thanking fans for their prayers and support. The news of Nate Dogg's death spread like wildfire, and the entire hip-hop community felt the loss. Tributes poured in from artists, producers, and fans everywhere. Social media lit up with people honoring the man who had given the game some of its most unforgettable hooks. Even though his life was cut short, Nate Dogg left behind a catalog that will never fade. His voice, the smooth, soulful sound that could make any track timeless, remains etched into hip-hop history.